Welcome back everyone. Today we continue with the next part of this series called What If Future Gohan Was Never Killed by the Androids. Let's aim for 350 likes on this one. Also, don't forget to leave a comment letting me know if you've enjoyed the series so far. With that, let's begin. The moment Trunks saw Gohan intercept Android 16, he sprang into action. Pushing himself to his limits, he raced toward his mentor, hoping to help Gohan stall 16 long enough for 18 to be consumed by the Masenko blast. But the gap between them was too great, and the battle had already been decided before he could reach them. The boy watched in despair as Gohan fell toward the ground far below. "I've got you, master!" Trunks reached Gohan just seconds after he began to fall and caught him in his arms. Gohan released a deafening scream that startled the lavender-haired boy so much he almost dropped the injured man. He tightened his grip and shouted in panic, "What's wrong, Gohan? What happened?" Knowing that Trunks couldn't possibly understand the pain he was experiencing, Gohan grunted as coherently as he could between spasms of pain. "Lay me down." The elder Saiyan clamped his eyes and mouth shut in agony. It seemed Trunks understood because a few moments later, Gohan felt wet grass against the back of his head. The pain was still constant, but at least now that he was lying straight, it was more bearable. At what felt like a glacier's pace, Gohan opened his eyes, only to shut them tight again as a giant boom exploded from the sky. The explosion sent heavy air currents crashing down on them, shaking the very earth beneath them. Gohan released another scream, muted by the sound wave of the newly exploded Masenko blast, as the vibrations from the ground made his back feel as if it was being broken all over again. He watched as the lavender-haired teen quickly turned his head to the sky, a distraught look washing over his face. "It didn't kill her," Trunks whispered in disbelief. Trunks whipped his head back to Gohan and said, "We need to get moving now." He tried to pick up Gohan again but froze when his wails of pain convinced him otherwise. "Stop," Gohan nearly shouted. "What's wrong?" Trunks asked, his voice filled with concern. I think he broke my spine. I can't be moved. I need a senzu. My waist, please," Gohan said, feeling himself slipping into unconsciousness. Trunks immediately began to search for the little brown pouch his master always secured to his belt, but to his terror, he found none. "I can't find it, Gohan," Trunks said frantically. Gohan only mumbled, "My belt," before his eyes closed. Trunks was almost tempted to shake his friend awake until he reminded himself of Gohan's injury. Again, he searched for the bag and received the same results. This time, however, he uncovered a torn piece of rope and leather pinned underneath Gohan's blue belt. No. Trunks realized that the bag had been torn off at some point in the fight, and could be lying anywhere among the fallen trees and craters. He stared back up into the sky and saw 16 huddling over 18 midair. They hadn't moved an inch since he last looked, though it seemed that 18 was cradling her arm. So she did take some damage. Good, she deserves it. Trunks turned back to his injured friend, Grandpa Gohan, realizing how exposed they were in the open. There were plenty of pine trees to hide under, and the boy cringed at what he had to do. "Sorry, Grandpa Gohan," he muttered, slipping his arms under the larger Saiyan's armpits to drag him to cover. Just as he began moving, a large hand gripped his forearm, stopping him in his tracks. "Do not move him any further. You will worsen his current condition," said 16, looming over Trunks. How had he gotten so close so fast? Trunks stared up at the android in shock, releasing Grandpa Gohan's shoulders and trying to free himself from 16's unyielding grip. "Let me go," Trunks snarled. To his surprise, 16 let go, causing Trunks to stumble back and fall on his backside. Trunks scrambled to his feet, ready to launch himself at the android, but a swift kick struck his cheek, sending him flying headfirst into a nearby tree. He pulled his head out of the skull-shaped hole in the tree trunk to see an angry 18 standing only a few feet from Grandpa Gohan. She gripped her right arm tightly, which was bleeding profusely and missing a few fingers. Loose skin hung limply down her arm, revealing small sections of shining metal through the blood. After glaring at Trunks, she turned her attention to the unconscious warrior. "No!" Trunks screamed, phasing out of sight and appearing with his fist cocked back, aiming for the back of 18's head. The blow missed as 18 easily sidestepped and spun around, swinging another kick toward Trunks's head. He ducked and swept her other leg with a spinning kick, causing the android to trip and fall on top of him. Seizing the opportunity, Trunks released the energy blast he had been building up in his hand, pressing it against 18's stomach. She grunted as she was launched into the air. After stopping mid-air, she glared down at the young half-breed with a livid expression. Trunks grinned and phased out of view. 18 pretended to be confused, whipping her head back and forth while tracking his movements from the corner of her eye. "Geez, he's slow," she thought. Trunks appeared above her, diving down with an outstretched kick. With bored eyes, 18 floated back only a foot, watching his shocked expression as he missed. Priceless, she thought, smiling at his failed attempt. She lifted her leg and carefully placed the heel of her shoe against Trunks' chest, violently shoving him away. He flew farther than any baseball player could ever hope to hit a home run. She admired her work, then with a burst of speed, appeared just a few feet behind Trunks as he barreled toward her. She lifted her foot again, this time aiming for the center of his back, and watched as he collided with her unyielding shoe. His back bent painfully the wrong way, his face plastered with a look of pure anguish. Oh, how I love that look, 18 thought, her lips curling into a satisfied smirk. She stomped downwards, aiming for the ground far below, and watched as Trunks smashed into the stony ground, creating a crater larger than most buses. Annoyance flickered across her face as a piece of dirt debris flew up and nearly landed on her. She swiped the grime away and sighed contentedly, a strand of hair falling in front of her eye. Out of habit, she released her damaged arm to push it back behind her ear, instantly regretting the move as pain shot through her shoulder. Grimacing, she reattached her hand to the severe puncture wound in her shoulder and stared down at her mangled, bleeding arm. Damn it, I need to finish this fast, or I'll lose too much blood to continue, she thought, frustration bubbling up. Honestly, Dr. Jarrow, why didn't you remove the whole bleeding out concept from my body? She floated down, watching with pleasure as Trunks struggled to rise from the crater, almost completely submerged in the rubble. Just as her feet touched the ground, he let out a sudden roar of anger, sending an explosive wave surging from his body. Rocks and dirt flew in all directions, crashing against the golden barrier 18 had conjured. When the debris settled, she lowered her shield and watched as the lavender-haired teen marched towards her, his glare matching her own intensity. He stood there, eyeing her, trying to seem as intimidating as possible while formulating a plan. I think I could probably handle her as she is now, Trunks thought, his mind racing. Seems she can't use her arms, so that's a big advantage. But there's no way I'll be able to finish her because that android 16 would immediately swoop in and save her. Damn it. Wait, why isn't he helping her now? He turned his gaze back to where 16 had been standing, only to find him gone, along with Grandpa Gohan. No, where is he? Where's Grandpa Gohan? Trunks' eyes widened, and his mouth gaped as he tried to figure out where the two had disappeared to. Finally, he whipped his head back towards 18 and snarled, "Where did he take him?" 18 let out a light, evil laugh at his rage. "Oh, don't worry, he's safe for now, unlike you." Her figure suddenly vanished. Responding immediately, Trunks leapt into the air, rising as fast as he could, hoping her attack wasn't coming from above. Thankfully, it hadn't been. He saw her appear below him, throwing her foot at where his back had been, aiming at his blind spot. She frowned up at him before shooting into the air after him. Trunks cocked back both his open hands, charging large golden balls of Kai in each before smashing them together towards 18's approaching figure. "Infinity Bullet!" he shouted, hoping to turn the tide of the battle. The resulting spray of hundreds of blasts seemed to hardly slow the android down. 18 easily swirled and twisted around each blast, moving faster than Trunks could even fathom. Nevertheless, Trunks continued to fire volley after volley of blasts, unrelenting as she made her way towards him. How in the hell is she so fast? He grimaced, seeing the gap between them quickly closing. Finally, giving up on the attack, Trunks spread his arms apart and roared with the ferocity of a lion as he released another explosive wave. The attack caught 18 off guard, knocking her back from the blast surging from the boy. Trunks took note of the incredibly loud wail of pain 18 expelled when the attack hit her, sending her back farther than the distance of a basketball court. 18 quickly regained composure as she was pushed to the limits of the attack. Trunks realized with a sudden clarity.
Her wound! The explosive wave smashed against her arm! Perfect!
The sane hybrid was gasping for air as he stopped exerting power to his explosive wave, the attack diminishing immediately. His eyes locked with 18, who, while not visibly tired as she was incapable of it, did look less than thrilled at the idea of rushing towards him again. Good, I'll have a small amount of time to think, Trunks thought. The explosive wave is my best bet since it's an all-encompassing attack, and if I get her close, she won't be able to dodge. But that last one really spent a lot of my Kai reserves. I probably only have a few of those attacks left in me. 18 prepared to move in again, and Trunks crunched up his body, an obvious signal another explosive blast was coming. She immediately froze in her tracks, continuing to glare at him while spitting a large variety of curses. The boy returned to planning. The damage to her arm must be what's doing her in. Otherwise, my attack probably wouldn't have hurt her that much. I have to use that to my advantage, but I can't hit her directly, and every time I release an explosive wave, it sends her flying out of the blast radius. Crap! Wait, I've got it! He smirked as his plan fell together. He raised his hands towards 18 again and shouted, Infinity bullet, firing as many blasts in the brief seconds he was allowing himself. Not this again, 18 muttered, dodging the bullets of golden light zooming past her. She attempted to reach the boy again. She would have started firing return blasts, but without the full usage of her hands. Any blast she sent would have been sloppy and inaccurate. She knew that the boy was planning a repeat of the last exchange. He wanted her to dodge the blinding barrage of energy blasts and then be just barely out of reach. She knew he would then throw out his arms and release that annoying explosive wave again. But this time, she was ready. She would put up a shield and block the wave but pretend to be caught in the blast so that the lavender-haired brat would deplete all his energy in a pointless attack. Finally, this damn fight will end, she thought, determined to see her plan through. When the blinding infinity bullet ceased, 18 was momentarily confused as Trunks' figure had disappeared. Her head whipped back and forth for real this time, trying to catch sight of the sane hybrid causing her all this trouble. That little jerk used the infinity bullet as a diversion. Where'd he go? She thought angrily. She felt a poke at her boot and saw Trunks floating just below her with both hands close to his forehead, fingers spread out towards his eyes. Wait a second. Is that solar flare? Trunks shouted. 18 screamed in fury as the bright flash singed her eyes, desperately wishing she could release her wounded arm and rub her eyes just a little. But that opportunity didn't come as she suddenly felt arms wrap around her from behind, putting her in a full Nelson. She screamed as her right arm was ripped away from the now gushing wound on her left side. She struggled, but the pain in her eyes and arm was too much for her to focus on what was happening around her. She could barely register that it was still only Trunks doing this. Fucking bastard, she cursed. 18 leaned her body forward as much as she could before violently whipping back, smashing the back of her head into the boy's nose, promptly breaking it. She felt his grip lighten and went to repeat the action when she heard a gurgled, blood-filled whisper. Explosive. No, she thought in panic. Wave. Trunks finished. 18 screamed as she felt the attack hit her. Usually, this would have done nothing, but the open wounds along her unprotected left arm brought a pain like none she'd ever experienced before, and she wasn't moving. She wasn't being freed from the blast. His grip was too strong, and she couldn't shrug him off while he let loose this onslaught of pain upon her arm. She shut her eyes tight, trying not to completely shut down from the trauma. Her system was being overloaded with messages to retract her arm, to remove it from the fire, to save it. But suddenly, the thoughts and warnings stopped, as did the pain. What? She thought, confused. She slowly opened her eyes, perplexed. There was still a dull pain at her shoulder, but nothing more. Her surrounding body barely even felt the boy's trivial attack as it seemed to be dying down in power. Curious and grateful for the relief in pain, she looked down at the condition of her arm. Had a wire registering pain disconnected? Or maybe her system understood that sending the pain was hindering her from stopping the pain. Or maybe it was gone. Her arm was gone, nothing but air from the shoulder down. It had been completely torn off. No, no, no. With her thoughts no longer focused on her wounds, 18 was able to concentrate. She whipped her head back again, smashing the back of her head into the boy's nose, putting more force into the attack than last time. The headbutt and the fact that the young Sen could no longer maintain his full Nelson caused him to finally release the furious android and cease his explosive wave. She spun around with a vicious roundhouse kick, colliding with the boy's ribs and breaking several of them. Trunks gasped in pain. The wind knocked out of him as he was sent crashing into the ground below. 18, panting heavily and glaring down at him, knew she had to finish this quickly before she lost too much more energy. Trunks gasped, clutching his newly broken ribs, and didn't see the fist flying towards his face. The blow struck hard, sending him flying, but before he could get far, 18 grabbed his boot and dragged him back to the earth, violently smashing him into the ground. Trunks tried his best to get back on his feet, but 18 placed a charging photon blast to his chest, preparing to fire. A large hand grabbed her wrist and pulled it upwards, forcing the beam to tear through the sky rather than through the boy. A small explosion sounded out from above, causing Trunks to look up in confusion. Unable to spot anything, he concluded that a plane had suffered a sad fate. Stop now. He is no longer a threat, 16 said, looming over her petite figure. How had Trunks not noticed this Goliath of a man appear? He took my arm, she screamed, spit flying from her mouth. He deserves to die. You told me he was required for your plan to succeed, 16 said calmly. That was before. Now he dies. She swung a rogue kick at Trunks' head, but before the blow could connect, 16 lifted her by her arm into the air. The kick passed through the air just above Trunks' hair. Put me down, you piece of shit, she screamed, her legs thrashing childishly towards Trunks. The sane teen simply stared in shock at what he was seeing. Stop exerting yourself, 18. You will worsen your condition, 16 said. What are you talk? 18 paused mid-sentence as a wave of dizziness hit her. obscuring her vision and making her head droop slightly. She tried to speak again, but it was only a jumble of incomprehensible words to Trunks. He looked down, following the red drippings from her shoulder, and caught sight of the growing pool of blood beneath the two. Her body has begun to shut down, 16 said as he reached down and casually picked Trunks up, lifting the struggling teen by his arm. This time it was Trunks' turn to scream. "Let me go! What are you doing? Where's my master? What did you do with him?" 16 took off in flight, carrying the limp figure of 18 on his shoulder and tightly gripping the flailing Trunks by his arm. He spoke with no emotion. "Flying to Dr. Gero's lab. Your master is unconscious at the lab, placed on a table to be helped later." "Helped later?" Trunks repeated the words carefully. Why would this android want to help Grandpa Gohan? What are you planning to do with us?" Trunks asked nervously. For a brief moment, 16 glanced down at the lavender-haired teen and said, "That decision is for Android 18 to make." Trunks turned his head and stared at the unconscious form of 18. "What are you planning?" he thought. His thoughts were interrupted by a light crashing sound back towards the battlefield. His eyes focused near where he and 16 had been standing and spotted a small steel sphere now laying smoking in the crater he had been in. What the? Trunks wondered. As the distance between the sphere and Trunks widened, he could just barely make out a large section missing, producing the smoke. It looked like something had plowed right through it. As he thought it over in his mind and the sphere slowly dwindled from sight, he recalled the rogue blast 18 had fired into the sky. So, now I know what destroyed it, but what is it? Trunks pushed the thought to the back of his mind, realizing that the sphere was the least of his problems. Or was it? That's it for this episode, guys. If you've watched to the end, then that may be an indication that you enjoy the episode, so please drop a like so the video could reach more people. See you in the next episode. Take care.